So you'll often hear me say things like, don't worry about the song the key is in, or the key doesn't matter. And I make a lot of these bold claims sometimes because I'm not saying that the song or the key of the song doesn't really mean anything to me. It's not important. As in, who cares? Who cares knowing which key a song is in? It's useless. Why would anybody care which key a song is in? So there is a reason that I teach the way I do. And I like to look at it and break it down into three different ways. You have your gospel, chord progressions, traditional, and you have your Christian contemporary music, CCM, chord progressions, and then you have your jazz, or modal jazz chord progressions. So that's the name of my channel. All these things combined, or they consist of, gospel music consists of these three elements. There are more, but these are the three basic elements, at least to me, you'll find in gospel music. Hence the name of the channel, Gospel Progressions University. My name is Chris Moses, and this is Gospel Progressions University. So there are many reasons why the key of a song would be useful. For example, it makes it easier to communicate with other singers and musicians, so everyone is playing the same key and not having to guess which key that the song is based on, or to have to actually depend on a recording to get the key of the song. Or in a music publication where the song is noted in the original key is especially helpful. This is helpful for singers and the instrumentation range. You have different, instruments that are pitched differently, and it's just, better for overall for communication. The thing is that so much for contemporary gospel music is heavily influenced by jazz that for some chord movements in certain song sections, it's almost silly to think of what chord would go here, when the thinking should be, which chord can I play based on the scales or the scale tone that I hear. So playing for church or playing contemporary gospel music is a lot like playing a mixture of jazz, gospel fusion mixed with traditional music with a side dish of contemporary Christian music, or CCM. Now, the key is to know the difference between all of these. So for example, we have our CCM, we have our traditional gospel progressions, we have our modal jazz chord progressions. Now between those three, we're constantly going back and forth if you're going to play at church or play any kind of contemporary Christian music. CCM and traditional gospel hymns change melodically and harmonically, and they rely on a tonal center for the most part. So it does make sense to pay close attention to which key the song is being played in. However, jazz tends to be played modally. What that means, instead of being driven by harmonies and chord structure found in the actual key of the song, diatonically, and when I say diatonic, I mean, we're just sticking just to that key itself. Many times the chord structures are based modally. So a mode basically is a inversion of a scale, and more on that in a little bit. Now, with CCM, our contemporary Christian music, the chord progressions are mostly diatonic. Like I said, the diatonic in nature. So this style of music is probably truest to a key's tonal center. So tonal center meaning that, okay, if the key is notated as C, well, you're going to be playing C as major, D as minor, F is major, G is major, A is minor, B is diminished, and everything else, and so on and so forth. So I may have missed E, so E minor, because there's nothing crazy going on, especially something in a simpler key like C. And, you can learn to play like that using CCM. And they're very easy for singers to sing along with, and other musicians to learn. The congregation can sing along as well. This actually was incorporated with gospel music, or with gospel music style. People like Aaron Lindsay, or I should say Israel Houghton. He pushed that a lot in the 2000s. And his influence was from other musicians that played largely gospel and jazz-based stuff. And so you had this crossover and this hodgepodge of different styles. And so now it became popularized, I should say, in many churches, and not just for churches of a particular persuasion, but many churches, across America, across the world. So you have the influence of these guitarists and, all these other crossover artists. Now, typically, these chords are largely 4-chord diatonic patterns. That means there's no accidentals or no notes, of course, played outside the key. Like, for example, let's take a song here. I pull up the song Anthem. All right, this one here by Planet Shakers. So now we have this kind of chord progression. So 6, 7, very simple. Go to 4, 6, and 5. So Something like that just keeps repeating. Again, it's in D flat, right? This is version I pull up on YouTube. And they start off on Hallelujah. Either you can go the 4 over the 6, or you can just go 6, 6, 4, 5, rather, A flat over 7 and 1. You have your won the victory. You go to 5, right? And the same sequence, same chords over and over again. You're not really leaving the key. You're playing, everything that's in D flat. All right. So we have something like that, for example, and something like that can be learned pretty much by anyone first learning the song. But this is also played in a lot of churches that play a lot of traditional gospel music. That wasn't the case all the time, but you have something like that. We have that. And we also have like this guy, Jeremy Camp. He does the song Overcome, which of course was done again by Ty Tribbett. So this is an A. So you have your A as the first chord. Go to 6, F sharp. And of course the 4 chord, or 5 chord. And then go to 4. Back to 1. So something like that is very simple for musicians. There's nothing crazy going on. When I say crazy, it's if you're beginning to learn how to play or sing, it's simply just there's notes that are diatonic to the scale. So you just have to know 7 notes and which chords are what. If it's a minor, well, it isn't the 1. It's either going to be the 3, the 6, or the 2. All right. And if it's a major chord, it's either going to be the 1, the 4, the 5. This is diminished, which often you won't have diminished chords being played. It's going to be the 7 in the tone scale. So yeah, we have our major. I'm way down here. I'm sorry. We have our major here, and then of course another major, minor rather. That's for A, and of course we're going to have our 3, which is going to be minor again, and our 4 is major, 5 is major, 6 is minor, and the 7 would be diminishing and back to 1. That's what I mean by the numbers. So with traditional gospel hymn progressions, you're going to largely have dominant and secondary dominant chord changes. So gospel music is melodically driven, and it's motivated by harmonic phrases and has a strong tonal center. All right, there are certain chord movements and certain progressions that are almost exclusive to gospel or have a very gospel or churchy type feel. So for example here, like if we did something like this, let me go high on this keyboard here. All right, so something like this, we praise him in A. So if you pay attention to that, right? If you notice, there's this walk up here. It's based off of the diminished scale. Part of it is. All right. You can do it. You have your dominant here. This chord here is going to go right into that B, right? That B minor. So it'll be an F sharp chord going right into that B minor. And so that's what a secondary dominant is. For example, in the key of A, we just played it, right? So we have A, a secondary dominant, would take us, typically in gospel, you're going to have the 5 chord. It's going to be major of the next one. So in other words, in the key of A, we have B minor. That's the second chord. In the key of B, F sharp or G flat, F sharp in this case, it's B, would be a dominant chord. So we go from here, and then we're trying to get to that. Okay, so it brings a stronger sound. Of course, it comes from another scale that would make the B minor and the F sharp a major dominant chord. And then we could still end up in A, but you have a lot of secondary dominants. So we have like something like praise him, and you have that again, like even for the beginning of the song. Diminished chord, and praise him. So you go from there. You can do we go from to get to the F sharp, we can go to the C sharp. So we can use this chord here, it's dominant, and then to that minor, and then use this, and then go to the minor here. So other things in gospel music, you have a lot of secondary dominance. So take Amazing Grace. A flat, right? E flat. this, right? Something like that, right? And the sound. That save the wretch like me, right? So the first chord is going to be your 1 chord, and then it becomes dominant, and you go to your 4 chord. So what I did, I just did the typical gospel walk up. Like, you're not going to hear this in jazz. All right, so even for that, right? And it makes this dominant. How sweet, sweet, and then we have our diminished, which again is like 2 dominant chords put together. You have this here, this tritone, and then this tritone here. The sound. So you have your 1 chord over 5. It's another classic gospel sound. And then we have our diminished going to the 6th chord. That saved. Here comes the secondary dominant. A wretch like me, right? So the F chord is dominant to go to the 5 chord. And then we can do this again. And then we can do a lot of things, but I once was lost, but now am found. And then we can just walk down with this typical gospel move with that right there comes from the melodic minor. So what we're doing here, that's A flat melodic minor. All right. But now, so I'll go over that really quickly again. We have dominant chords. Like the first one is going to be a 7th, and it's going to take us to a 4 chord. So with gospel music, we have dominants, and we have big use of the 4 chord. Then we have the diminished chords. Then we have our 1 over 5. That's classic gospel. All right, and then a diminished to go to the 6th. Then the secondary dominant. Secondary dominant chord would be typically your F would be a minor chord in E flat, but it becomes major and it becomes a dominant chord to go to a 5. Subdominant, or I should say secondary dominant rather. And then 5. And then we can go back to 1 again. All right, so, and then when you do that other progression that I did, then we do the melodic minor, which is huge in gospel. Because you have this one and this one have nothing to do with E flat major, but they have everything to do with A flat melodic minor, which are these notes here. So because gospel music is tonal in nature, it actually makes it easier to make the chord you're going to the tonal center. So for example, I just played that F dominant 7. Well, the next chord would be the B flat. So I now make B flat the tonal center because of the A. That would not be an E flat. That's normally an A flat. If I played E flat as a 7, like I did with the very first chord, because I added that D flat, I now make the A flat the dominant or the tonal or key center. And that's what I mean by tonal center. That's just a perfect example of it. The secondary dominant just makes, with the secondary dominant chords, just make that next chord that you're progressing to the key or tonal center. The point that I'm making is that this is gospel music. You're going to have dominant chords. You're going to have a lot of use of the dominant chord going to a 4 chord, diminished chords, 1 over 5 movements, all right, and the melodic minor scale. So the melodic minor scale and the dominant chords, 7 scales, of course, you're going to have your pentatonic and blues scales and things like that. But I don't want to get too much into that. I do in other videos, and I'll post them up here for you so you can see on the screen. But the point I'm making simply is that we have that sound in gospel, and it's not too much, I should say, altered chords or things going on. You can't use them. The reason is because there's so many dominant chords. They don't fit as well in contemporary music. For that reason, because contemporary music, or Christian contemporary, I should say, CCM tends to be more based off of just diatonic chords. With jazz chord progressions don't always follow a prescribed tonal center. All right. So for example, if I was going to take something, right, like we'll go to this song here, Anthem, right, that we did before. Yeah, that's what we did before, right? So, what was it? We walked up from Holland. So you would have that, but in gospel, of course, you're gonna gospelize this. You would use secondary dominants, but then now we have, with contemporary gospel, we have chord changes that are borrowed from jazz and gospel. So what I would do if I was gonna take this in and change the chords up a little bit. To tell you the truth, is I'm not even sure whether it's a gospel or jazz thing because the genres cross over so much. But again, with these chord substitutions and these different types of movements and the trills, those kind of that type of feel comes from gospel. But again, we can take that same chord progression that's sung by anthem, has nothing to do with gospel. It's Christian contemporary music. We can take the same chord progression we just did from the anthem from Planet Shakers and just add some chords in there and make some movements that gives it a different sound and gives it a gospel sound or gospelize it. And again, if I'm looking at something like this, this kind of chord progression like I did before, I can't, it's hard for me to say, well, this, if this is all I heard outside of the context of a key tonal center, I don't know what it is. I can just be like, well, I guess they're playing the diminished scale, I think, or one of these diminished scales. I'm not sure because, I'm hearing a lot of things going on. I know where it could go, but, the only context I have in that at that time is the tones that they're playing, because I can do that, I can play that same thing I just played. And end up in A flat. That's the thing about jazz, because it's modal. Like I showed you guys, I think it was last week, the augmented scale. Like for example, we'll do the E flat augmented scale, I believe it was, right? So, or rather, yeah. So it's minor third, all right, minor third, and then minor third and one. So. And this here, I'm playing a song, right? All right. I can end it in G major 7 if I'm thinking about modes, because a mode, like I mentioned before, is an inversion of a scale. So, we did this. This is the first position here, and if I just inverted this and I took this E flat, let me leave it here, and then we played it on the top, I'm going to start now from F sharp or G flat. 6 tone scale, 1 2 3 4 5 6, and so that's another mode of it. So when I'm thinking of this, I'm like, okay, well, what can I do to alter this? How can I change this? All right. Okay, so I have this chord here, and I'm like, all right, well, I can do this. This chord I can play this chord here. There's a lot of things that I can do. So, just understand that between the differences between the gospel, you have your jazz, modal jazz, and your CCM music. Again, modal is just, for example, you have your major scale, C major. You have another inversion of it. It'll give you another mode, of that same scale and so forth and so on. And with Christian contemporary music, it is basically just all the keys that are belonging to whatever particular key you happen to be in. With gospel music, contemporary gospel music, or rather I should say traditional gospel music, with traditional gospel progressions, you'll have different things like secondary dominants. You'll have the 1/5 chord, you'll have diminished chords, 4 chord movements, and there's other trills and other tricks that are done in gospel. I can't cover right now. This video is already long enough, but you have your contemporary gospel music that is a mixture of all of that. Like one last example here that I have is what with Kirk Franklin. He does that song. Let me pull that one up. So
I can't escape being afraid. Fill me with you
right, so very simple chord changes. And go to the 4 again. 4, 2. This is D flat. I think they go to 6 here. Probably. And then go to 5. So all that is, what I'm doing, or what they're doing, or what I'm hearing, are very simple chord changes. But this is Kirk Franklin. I grew up hearing his stuff in the 90s and playing it, stomp and whatever. Well, they didn't let us play that because it was worldly music. But you had a bunch of other, songs that he'd written, and a lot of it is jazz based. You have that sound in it. But then he takes something like this, and it's very simple message. And you don't want the song to be confused or twisted up with a bunch of hard music behind it. And there's time and there's space for all of that. But the takeaway here is that I want you to understand when I say don't worry so much about the key center is easy to get. You'll get that, especially with CCM, with all gospel music pretty much. But then there are sections of the songs that won't make sense if you pay attention to key centers, because you won't have a clue what key it's in or what the progression is, I should say, because you're so focused on catching the key, you'll miss the language behind what's going on. What this keyboard player, what he or she is trying to say with the music, and what other options are available to you. I hope this makes sense to you, and I hope it's clear to you. If you haven't yet, you should check out my website. You can download my free guide. It's called What Do Pro Musicians Know That You Don't? It's over at gospelprogressionsuniversity.com/Gospel Keys Pro. I'll leave the link in the description. The link should be up on the screen over here. Any questions, you can hit me up. You can email me, leave a comment in the comment section. Let's chat a little bit about some of these things, because I know some things can go over some people's heads. There may be some questions, and don't be afraid to ask, because I'm not afraid to answer. God bless you, and I will see you in the next video.